Duval. Jeff Hallinan will not be here, but we also have the mayor, the safety director, Hannah Wynn, the zoning inspector, as well as Mark Bidwell, the auditor. So we will go ahead and get started. Can we do a roll call, please, Melissa?
Hallinan.
Absent.
Hedges.
Here.
Duval.
Here.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Melissa sent out the meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was on April 30th, which was a Tuesday. Any corrections, changes, additions?
Move to approve.
All right. Motion to approve the minutes by Tom Duval. I will second that. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right. So on our agenda this evening, we have two pieces of legislation to consider, and then we will receive a safety levy update from Mayor Michelle Blanton. To get us started, Melissa, could you please read the first resolution that we have in front of us?
Resolution approving a vehicle leasing and replacement program with Enterprise Fleet Management, Inc., and authorizing the safety and service director to enter into agreements related to the same and declaring an emergency.
All right. Thanks, Melissa. So before we get started, we do have a representative, Ross from Enterprise. But Mark, if you could give us just a little bit of a background on how this initiative kind of got started, why you initially engaged Ross, that would be appreciated just for some background.
I can give you the true story of what happened with me and Ross. Actually, I was waiting for another phone call from the area code. I thought it was him calling, or I thought somebody else was calling, and I picked up from a salesperson, which I normally don't do, to be honest with you. I spoke with him. He was engaging, and he actually has his wife that actually lives here in Circleville, and so there was some background with us in that case. And then after a few minutes, what he started speaking about really made a lot of sense to me. So from that point, I engaged Jim Stanley, and we started looking at the possibilities. Ross came up. He's been up here several times, and it's an hour and a half drive for him, and he's taken a lot of time to come up here and show us everything with this program. Basically, what this is going to do, hopefully, is going to really decrease our cost of our fleet management, and also save us a lot of time, which is really what me and Jim really liked. I mean, even if it costs the same amount, saved us amount of time, it would be worth it. But this is also going to hopefully save us some money. But Ross when he goes through this presentation, he'll really be able to break it down. But it was just a chance that I picked up the phone, and I'm glad I did. I'll put it that way.
Okay, thank you. So again, before we turn it over to Ross, the presentation that is part of his analysis that he has prepared that he will share tonight, all this information was provided from Mark Bidwell. So it is accurate, true to the city's actual true dollars are spent for these different areas. And then this is, again, a resolution. It would be approving a vehicle leasing and replacement program. There was a correction that came, I believe, late this afternoon from the law director's office. It did change a very small word in here. It's also authorizing the safety and service director to enter into an agreements related to the same and declaring an emergency. So I just wanted to clarify that. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, if not, we'll turn it over to Ross.
Alrighty, we want to just thank everyone for your time. I put together a presentation for the city a little while ago. I've added a couple things, taken a couple things out when we figured out additional needs. So I'm just going to run through that real quick. Of course, Enterprise Fleet Management is what we do. This is for the city of Circleville. What this is basically a circle of all of the different areas of business that we work with inside of. I had a coworker describe this once as a leaky bucket, and it's kind of perfect. And we're going to be talking about this several times throughout, but when we come in as a partner, it's a partnership. It's not about me coming in and telling you what you're going to do, and if you don't do what we say, then we're going to have to split ties. It's much more of reactionary of what the city's needs are and how we can help you. So acquiring vehicles, we like to factory order when possible. Usually we see between $2,000 to $6,000 of savings when we're factory ordering vehicles. It just depends on how much you're spending off the lot. Financing and credit lines, multiple different ways to finance vehicles. What we're going to talk about today, from what government is used to, is the financing down a vehicle instead of just paying cash in bulk. License, title, and registration. This is the mindset of when you guys get the vehicle here, it's ready to roll. So you guys can just hit the road. You're not worried about plates coming in, titles, registration, all that, which can be a headache. Aftermarket equipment. So this is more along the sides of the engineer's fleet as well as the police fleet. These vehicles require additional equipment from the factory. So when the vehicle gets here, we want to make sure that the vehicle is ready to hit the road, just like the license and title. Maintenance programs, this would be something that excludes the police fleet, but all of the other vehicles would be on the full maintenance program. This is a fixed and budgeted cost. So instead of paying outrageous costs for maintenance and seeing spikes with high maintenance expenses, you're on a fixed and budgeted plan. Fuel programs, this is WEX, which the city actually already uses, which is great. I'm going to be personally working with WEX to try to assure a Sheets discount. So even more savings when it comes to the fuel section. Accident risk management, this is insurance. This is something that, once again, like the leaky bucket, Circleville already has a good handle on this, so no reason to really go into that with what we may do there. Telematics, these are devices that might track engine data, where the vehicle is the vehicle idling, is the vehicle braking too quickly, is it accelerating too quickly, stuff like that. And then alongside of telematics, if we do have maybe some upset feelings with some of our drivers, we can offer driver safety and training programs. And then vehicle resale, this is where we really hit hard. Through our vehicle resale, the idea there is no one buys better than us, but also no one sells better than us. We hand sell all of our vehicles to dealership lots, to mom and pop lots, but they get paid on how fast they sell the vehicle, how many vehicles they sell at once, and for how much more did they earn over the black book value. So if you can imagine, when you're hand selling vehicles, they're really trying a lot harder to get the cost up. This slide's basically just describing what we notice is, yes, please.
I apologize. I was waiting for you to stop talking, but aftermarket, does that include police vehicles?
Yes, sir. So the mindset there is, no matter what kind of vehicle you guys want to acquire, fire trucks and ambulance excluded, sadly. When the vehicle gets here, it's completely ready. So all police equipment will be installed before getting here.
Per our specifications.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ross, just real fast, since we had a question about that slide, to go back.
Yeah.
The maintenance program, this was one that I previously asked you, but for the fixed cost, which I understand excludes the police vehicles for the maintenance,
Yes.
can you talk just real fast about what type of maintenance that includes?
Yes. Great question. So that's basically all of your preventative stuff. The plan is basically built around staying under 100,000 miles. So you're going to be on a fixed expense under 100,000 miles. It's going to include one set of brakes and 4 tires. And if anything happens under 100,000 miles, which of course we don't expect, but there are lemons, exclusions, we will actually also cover those expenses. So if something blows, which shouldn't have, under 100,000 miles, we will honor that and pay for that.
Thank you.
It's really awesome stuff. All right. So back into this, as we all know, when a vehicle leaves the lot, it tanks. Depreciation is not something we can control, but it's something that we understand and we can plan for. Fuel expenditures, as a vehicle gets very old, 150 plus, you start to lose MPG. But by not getting newer vehicles, you also miss out on the CAFE standard, which is the government standard of increasing MPG yearly. So losing on older vehicles and then losing on the standard, you might, by not cycling vehicles, lose a couple miles per gallon per year. And then maintenance, as I'm sure everyone here knows, as a vehicle gets rather old, the maintenance expenses drastically increase. Transmissions, engines, struts, etc. These are the costs that we want to stay away from by cycling younger vehicles. The red circle is where we see almost all of our clients are usually running vehicles. The mindset here, it's not a bad one. It's just what we've basically realized is how people think about it is once you buy the vehicle, it's paid off. You don't have to worry about anything. But in actuality, by not retaining equity in your fleet and keeping the fleet moving and having older vehicles, maintenance expenses drastically increase. Fuel increases slightly, but it's just, it's more expensive to run older vehicles than it is to cycle younger vehicles, especially with the government buy, which is why government runs this so well. All right, right into meat and potatoes. So this is the analysis that we put together for the city. This is based on a 10-year period. There's some assumes in this is this is on 28 vehicles. The city does have more vehicles than just 28, but the mindset there is your bigger vehicles, 3500s, dump trucks, vehicles with heavy aftermarket. The idea is to keep those vehicles for as long as possible. We don't want to cycle those vehicles because the aftermarket expenses are so high, it doesn't make any sense to cycle those vehicles. Also, the cost of those vehicles is so high. so it wouldn't fit into the regular cycling plan. So the current maintenance is about 322. After speaking with Mark a time or two, our maintenance assumed cost is actually a little low, which is good because we like to be conservative in our savings. So just jumping right into it. In the first year, the mindset is to replace 15 vehicles. And the reason that is we're going to get rid of all of the older vehicles in the fleet, which that's where you're seeing your high maintenance expenses and your increased fuel expenditures. And we're going to replace those, not with a giant cash buy, but through the budgeted lease program, so you guys can get more for less. We're going to hopefully factory order those vehicles that we don't need immediately, which we can get out of stock. And then we're going to pay those vehicles down to a residual because the government buy is so good. Instead of paying down to zero, you can get many more vehicles for a lower cost. And in the first year, so spendings of 151, while selling those 15 vehicles, we're assuming that we're going to get 52,000 out of those vehicles. These are very conservative numbers. We always remain conservative because if I come to you with a number like 70 grand, and I come back to the city with 50, we're going to be a little upset about that. So we like to be conservative with the figures. So equity lease, 13 between those two numbers. Maintenance expenditures, you're going to see the top yellow line is what you're currently doing. With the first year with us, $58,000. So drastic increase in your maintenance expenditures, right? Because we're taking away all of those vehicles that are going to be having those issues. And then your fuel expenditure drops down slightly, but not a ton, right? Like I said, if you're missing out on the CAFE standard and your fleet's very old, you'll get a little bit better, but nothing that's eye-opening. And then so total fleet budget is $213,000. So in the first year, we're estimating we're going to save you $96,000 by replacing 15. So that sounds, I'm sure, impossible. I'm going to give you 15 brand new vehicles, and I'm telling you I'm going to save you 90 grand. That's usually where this presentation stops, and everyone says no. The mindset here is when I get rid of all of your vehicles that have such high costs of just retaining them, they have horrible MPG. They're dragging their feet. So the miles per gallon is between usually 10 and 15. Their maintenance expenditures are a nightmare. Once you get rid of these two things and you replace them with brand new vehicles that have the most recent standard, and obviously very low maintenance expenditures, especially since we're only going to run those to around 100,000 miles, you can save a ton of money just by removing those two things. The cost of the $151,000 that we put together for the budget, the mindset there is we want to make sure that our fees are lining up for what you guys actually need this year. After talking with the team, we found out that we needed 2 trucks for the engineering department. So the number we put in there was for somewhere around the cost of 2 trucks. So we wanted to be right on what you guys were expecting to spend this year when it comes to acquiring vehicles. And then if you continue to go down the list, you'll see eventually the mindset is to have the entire fleet on the program. Obviously, a lot of units in the first year, and then a lot. But then after you get past the first 2 years, you're fully on the couple of years, you're fully on the program. A couple things to focus on here. Your maintenance expense, a couple lines down, that eventually becomes fixed. That's because if we're on the full maintenance program, you guys are just paying us for the monthly maintenance fee. That's fixed and budgeted. Your costs won't move. You won't have those one-off engine blows. And if you do, we pay for the cost of that through the full maintenance program. Your fuel expenditures, see, I think I always say that this is maybe a little inaccurate, but the 59,705, that's fixed, but in fact, it will get slightly better as the CAFE standard gets slightly better. So it might be 59,705 in several lines, but it will actually be a little bit better by the time we get down there. Because if we're running around the exact same mileage, but the MPG keeps getting better, you'll have lower fuel expenditures. And then your fleet budget is scattered just depending on, and then your net cash. If you look, excuse me, towards the bottom of the 10-year savings, the mindset is running newer vehicles, very low maintenance expenditures, lower fuel expenditures. The city gets new vehicles, you have less risk and less headaches. You guys have to stop running the mindset and the nightmare of running all of this data, figuring out what vehicles you need, trying to find the vehicles, plating these vehicles, getting the aftermarket installed. And then on top of all that, by running a newer fleet, buying the vehicles through factory order and through the government incentive, which we can secure for you guys since we're working alongside of you, selling those vehicles at the time that Enterprise Rent-A-Car has the infrastructure to know when is the perfect time to sell a vehicle, and then factory ordering the new vehicle to replace that one before we sell the other one, we can save the city, we estimate $523,000 in a 10-year span. Any comments or questions so far, please?
Questions for Jim, for Mark. You've had longer to look at this than we have. I assume you're supporting this and agreeing with what's being said.
I can say that I am. We've also spoken with the acting chief of police, Kenny Fisher, and he is definitely on board with this as well. And I think he has about the same size fleet as Service. I definitely let Jim speak to what his knowledge is and how he, from my perspective, it's everything seems really well. And I do want to mention that I was getting some information for the resolution. I spoke with the auditor down in Sharonville, Ohio, and they've had this program in place for at least 5 years, if not longer. And they did mention that they are very happy with this, and that was unsolicited. I didn't ask them. All I was asking about was a resolution, and they brought that forth to me. So, so there is some background to this that it does work.
So and maybe you're going to get to it, but so on the next page, this is like, it outlines the 13 vehicles that you're assuming this plan on.
Yes.
And am I right that 11 of the 13 are for the police department?
So yes, and previous emails we've discussed, this is just a list, right? So this is what we think, almost always based on year and mileage. So the police fleet is always going to do way more miles than any other department. So the mindset is get the police vehicles first, because by this time next year, who knows what their mileage could be. But those vehicles can be adjusted to whatever the city might need. I just closed the City of Union, and we had a plan similar to this, but he needs 2 dump trucks as well and a 3500 with like a 10-foot extension bed.
Mhm.
So once again, it's working alongside the city. The list is what we estimate would probably be best, just based on year and mileage.
Yeah, so your analysis is solely based on that.
Yes.
But to confirm, 11 of the 13 vehicles are for police, 6 of those are for police cars, and 5 of them are for administrative police vehicles.
Yes.
I'm not sure what it means when it says it's a full-size sedan replacement.
Something like on the police side, something like a Dodge Charger.
No, I'm sorry, I understand that. My question, I guess, really was for the mayor. 5 of those vehicles are needed at the police department right now?
That I don't know the specifics of.
Okay.
Awesome. With this replacement plan, it's meant to work around whatever you guys might need. After speaking with the chief, and I will just say, this mindset of this program almost works best with the police because they get newer vehicles, right? So there's no risk there of anything happening to those vehicles, and they can get more vehicles than they're used to getting through the finance option, right? Instead of getting 2 cruisers a year, we could be cycling and get maybe 5 cruisers a year if that's something that he would be interested in and it made sense for the city financially. So this is just a list of what we had so far, what we thought. And as we've talked about, if you look towards the bottom, those bigger trucks, that's something we usually would say, hey, hold on to those because those vehicles are so expensive. They probably have some sort of aftermarket on them. We're not going to probably get a lot of those when it comes to resale. So let's hold on to those, run those, cycle those. And then when we need those vehicles, you guys let us know, right? That's the partnership piece.
Okay.
And hey, 2 of them are brand new anyway, so. All righty. So we've gone over this a couple of times, just basically the 2 options. There are actually 3, but I don't offer the 3rd because it's a dealership lease and it's not good for anyone except us. So I don't even show it because it's a waste of your time. Option 1 is your open-end lease. This is what we're talking about. Legally, we have to call it a lease, but it is just financing the vehicles down. You own the vehicles 100%. We, at times, will hold title. The mindset there is factory ordering your vehicles, getting all the aftermarket done, licensing, titling, plating these vehicles becomes rather difficult when we're having to juggle the title back and forth, but you guys fully own the vehicles. The prepaid lease option, that's just what you guys are doing right now. It's just spending cash on vehicles to obtain whenever you guys might need something, whether it's an emergency or it's the regular yearly budget for vehicles. Alrighty. So we talked a little bit about this. This is basically how can we acquire vehicles for the city. Number one, and what we prefer to do always, is factory ordering your vehicles. Like I said, this is going to save you $2,000 to $6,000. That's not including your government incentives. So government incentives, we're going to save usually a couple, well, depending on the manufacturer, they're starting to come back. But I'm getting $2,500 on 2500s right now, around $6,000 on V8 Rams. So incentives are really starting to come back within the place, business place, but factory ordering gets you additional savings. The mindset there is, if you go down to order timing, if we're going to factory order for the city, we want to make sure that we are way ahead of that, right? If you need 3 police Durangos in 8 months, well, I'm going to order them right now. So even if they come in a little bit early, I can take your current vehicles, sell those for you, take the equity there, and then put the equity onto the Durangos, keeping your costs low. Infrastructure and stock. So basically, we are Enterprise. It's all of the brands in one. So any infrastructure that Enterprise Rent-A-Car has, we have access to that. So if you guys have immediate needs, we can work with dealerships if that's something you guys want to do, if you guys like working with the dealerships in town. But we also have our own infrastructure when it comes to pooling vehicles. And then once again, the incentive strategy, we want to make sure that we're getting every single dime off these vehicles as possible. That's why we factory order. That's why we make sure that we can lock down government incentives. And then the aftermarket process, we've talked about this several times. This is making sure that when the vehicle gets here, it's ready to go. You guys aren't waiting on parts to come in. You're not waiting on having to work through all that, call who or what, and organize all that through P&R or whoever you might work with. The vehicle's ready when it gets here. Alrighty, operating expenses. So this little screenshot right here is I took the city's zip code and then went 25 miles out and then screenshotted all of the locations that your team can take vehicles to have maintenance done, where it goes right back to your website, and it's billed through us. So if you can see that right there, I mean, there's well over 20. There's a lot in Lancaster, which is kind of wild, and a lot in Chillicothe, and then 2 here in town. And we've talked through emails about a couple of those locations, and the 2 in town that you guys usually take your vehicles to we already work with. So that's, your guy just goes in with the app, shows them their code, and then they bill us, nothing to worry about, and then everything's easy peasy. The mindset there is you're getting all the data, you're seeing how much you're spending in maintenance, making sure that what you're paying us, right, adds up, partnership. But at the exact same time, you're getting the right part, you're paying the right price, and then you're getting all that infrastructure and the data to follow behind that. We want to make sure that, not to say that you guys are or aren't, but we have several clients who, once they come onto our maintenance program, they really start to understand that they were overpaying for stuff. They were getting stuff put on their vehicles that they didn't need. You guys can see what I'm saying. It's about making sure that you're getting the right stuff put on your vehicles and for the right price. All right, so fuel program, we've talked about this before, WEX. Everything is the exact same of what you're doing. I'm going to work with Sheets to try to secure a couple cents additional off per gallon just to save the city additional funds. All this tracking, just like the full maintenance data and the maintenance management data, goes right back to the website. All of the stuff we're going to talk about today, everything comes back to one place where you each get a login. You can customize it to your wants and your needs, pie charts, graphs. It's a little too fancy for my taste, but it's got everything you could possibly want. Alrighty, so telematics device, this is the engine tracking data that we talked about. The police has their own form of this, and it's very complex, and it even ties into their body cams, their car cams. This isn't something we really think that we can help you guys with right now, because the police have already got this really solidly locked down. So unless you wanted these devices for the engineering fleet or personal vehicles, this would be probably something that the city already has, so no need to really explore it further. Talked about this a couple of times, just making sure you can see the pie chart and the graphs. This is one of the benefits of working with us, is having all of the data go to one place. Now, I know that we have WEX right now to try to have some understanding on fuel expenditures, but now you're going to get maintenance data from your old vehicles, from your new vehicles, those vehicles' fuel data, and that'll be broken down to every last VIN, every last driver, every last license plate. However you guys wish to customize it, it's all in your hands. The area that we talked about earlier on and where we win greatly is it's actually right under 100 dedicated remarketing employees now. These are men and women that are paid on how quickly they sell your vehicles, how many of your vehicles they sell at one time, so bulk selling, right? And then for how much more are they making past the black book value. Right now, we're seeing usually 10 to 20% above black book value cost. So that's not gov deals. That's like basically the retail version, the corporate version of Kelley Blue Book. So we really are competitive with getting every last dime out of the city's vehicles and then rotating those funds back into the fleet. If you guys didn't want to do that and you guys wanted something like something off the lease or even cash, we can do that as well. What makes the most sense though is to keep your monthly costs low. That's why we like to cycle those funds. Alrighty, already passed all of that. And this is me. So something I included in all of your packets is just all of the governments that we're currently working with. I think that list is actually very recent. Just this month, I think we updated it. So lots of cities, lots of counties, and then some other government-related businesses.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Tom, questions for Ross?
None.
No questions? Mayor?
Going back to your question, it looks like the regular vehicles that we have now are switching over to the SUVs.
Yeah, so on that sheet, it looks like 11 of them are going to become police SUVs.
I think 6 of them are already,
Yeah, 6 in total, but like if you look at.
6 are already SUVs, staying SUVs, and then 5 are not SUVs going to SUVs.
Right. So, I mean, I just wanted to clarify, 11 of them are for the police department.
Yeah.
In some capacity.
Yes, and once again, that's totally customizable. If you wanted to do 11 of something else, totally fine.
Yeah, so that.
Yes,
Go
ma'am.
ahead. No, I was just going to say, for purposes of, that was really just my question regarding that in general. For the purposes of the finance committee, obviously, we wouldn't make the decision regarding what vehicles would be part of the program. This is really just to allow the agreement to start to take place. I was just curious if that was what that looked like. I was surprised to see that. I assumed there would be more service vehicles on the list than that.
We'll work that out. And actually, the mindset with the 2 recently purchased is we will buy those vehicles out, take that equity, use it for the rest of the city for that lease, and we'll put those 2 trucks on the maintenance program. So then he'll have all the data on his vehicles.
Great. Thank you.
When it comes to police vehicles, something excited just for the meantime so I can share.
Yeah.
I've worked with Stellantis, which is just Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram, on getting $4,000 per police Durango right now. So we can save a lot of money in the police fleet if we're not brand loyal to those Explorers, which after talking to the interim chief, he seemed to not care too much. I know that will be like something like a city decision, but quite a lot of money off per vehicle.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, you're good. Mark, anything you wanted to add?
Between just the discussion between me and Ross through this process, to kind of explain it to maybe people who are listening at home, or to kind of put it on the record. The big thing that Enterprise is able to do as a result of the fact that we get our vehicles for so much lower price than what. If I went to the dealership and said, hey, I want this car, Enterprise out on our behalf through the government leasing program can save up to $10,000 or even more off that exact same vehicle, even if I get the best price that they would give me. So in theory, they could literally buy the vehicle, turn around and resell it and make money on every vehicle. Now, obviously that would be going against what the idea behind the program is, but that's the idea behind this whole process and how Enterprise can make this work, and that we won't have cars, we can almost sell a car 2 years after we've owned it for nearly the price that somebody would be buying that same vehicle that year. So That's not worded correctly. But basically what I'm trying to say is because they can turn around and sell these cars in a couple of years at a much higher price than what we normally would sell those vehicles for, because we are not in the business of selling. And also because of the discount we get up front, that is where they can make their money, so that enterprise, that Ross gets a paycheck every couple of weeks. And that, it doesn't look, when you look at the numbers, it took me a while to really understand how we can save that kind of money. But working through them all and saying, okay, every year we're selling 10 cars and we're, basically selling them for the same price we paid for them. We're close to it. And, again, the lower maintenance cost, it really made a lot of sense. So I just kind of want to make sure that it's out there, that there is, they are making money, but at the same time, we are saving a considerable amount of money, and the time is just as valuable.
And so one thing I wanted to know, we had previously, in a previous meeting, we had discussed how you had quantified the maintenance costs. And one thing that was not included in that quantifiable data on the analysis sheet was time and effort that is our service department puts toward the vehicle. So I just wanted to note that that is not included in those costs. It would be an additional savings than what's outlined.
Most definitely, Ms. Hedges. And the mindset there is, right, is this is what we do professionally. This is my job. And then when you come on board, you'll have your own team that you can call. I mean, you'll have their cell phone number, their email. They are your team. Yeah. And that's the mindset, right? Is you guys do this best. The data, all of our competitors, we do fleet best. So it's about just partnering.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have two council people who are in the audience. Any questions for either of you? No. No? Mr. Rhodes? Okay.
Quick question, Jim. Do we currently have the maintenance data that we would get with this program currently in our existing system, if you will, City Circleville?
No, we don't operate a maintenance database.
That's what
for
I'm
our
thinking. So
equipment.
basically, we get a database, we save time, even if you broke even, instead of saving money, it's to our advantage, I would think.
Yeah, it would be, and operating newer vehicles is obviously more reliable.
I'm not suggesting we don't want the profit, don't misunderstand me. But I'm just saying, it seemed to me that there's several arguments here that this is a good idea, even without that.
And it also, we're not tied to this as well. Ross didn't mention this, but if at any time we decide, we're done with enterprise, at that moment we're done. There's no, the only thing we're on the hook for is until the end of that month, as far as I understand. That basically we would be paying for whatever.
Well, and the financing of the cost of the vehicles.
Yes, that would still be ongoing, but basically we could at any time end that relationship. So there's nothing that we're tied to, except for, again, the cost of the vehicles, which we would be paying for.
Financing somewhere else, yeah. Anything else?
I would just like to say that from the logistics side of the titles, the leasing, the titles and the plates and all of that, plus the outfitting, having that be done by somebody else, it really does help us in getting those vehicles back on the street as quickly as possible.
Right, the mindset there, guys, is not only are you going to have all that done when the vehicle gets here, but we're going to make sure that it's done at the right price and it's done as quickly as possible. Because you don't want to lose us as a client, right? And if we ever have anyone who's got the wrong prices, you're risking losing enterprise as a client, which is not a business decision for them to make.
Ready for a motion?
Okay, if there are no further questions or discussion, I would entertain a motion.
I would move that we recommend this to council for approval at their next meeting.
All right, so there is a recommendation on the floor by Tom Duval to move this on to council with a recommendation for passage to the next meeting, which would be next Tuesday, May 21st. I will second that. Melissa, can we please do a roll call?
Hedges,
Yes,
Duval.
Yes.
thank you. That will move forward on May 22nd to council. Thank you very much,
Thank
sir. Okay, next thing on our agenda, we have an ordinance coming from the service department, a little bit to the service department from you. I thought you wanted to speak to this a little bit as well, Jim.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, okay.
housekeeping.
All right, Melissa, if you could go ahead and read it.
An ordinance amending the annual appropriation ordinance in the general fund 101 street construction fund 203 City Permissive Motor Vehicle Fund 205, Capital Improvement 0.4% Income Tax Fund, 206 Capital Improvement Fund, 306 Waterworks Improvement and Extension Fund, 819 and Sanitary Sewer Improvement and Extensions Fund, 920 of the City of Circleville.
Perfect. Thank you, ma'am. All right. Jim, do you want to speak to your piece of it?
Well, actually, most of it's going to be mine. It's just a couple of items on here.
Okay.
I'll go over the items and I'll skip over the stuff that Jim's going to cover.
Perfect.
So basically in 101, what we're looking at is the calls for a planner position. Basically that's beginning, since it's going to be pretty much half the year, a little bit less than half the year, or around half the year we're going to be paying for. That's going to be around 53,100. That's going to be all of the payroll, OPERS, Medicare, and insurance, depending on if the person picks up insurance or doesn't. So, so that's 53,100 that I'm requesting for General Fund 101. And then let's see, I'll skip this one because that's going to be and that's. And then there is, let's see, we're in the capital improvement 0.4%. There was a Amazon truck that hit one of our light poles and they reimbursed us $5,076.56. So I'm putting that back into the account so that they can make that payment to take care of that incident. And then finally in the 819 and Fund 920, there was an old vac truck. We got the new vac truck a few months back, and this is the sale of that old vac truck. So there's going to be $72,250 put in both of those funds, and I'm appropriating those funds for them to be able to use those. The remainder of the money that's we're looking at, which is for vehicle leases and also for salt, road salt, let Jim speak to.
Real fast on
Sure.
the vac truck. I'm sorry, just explain real fast. Why are the funds being split into those two?
Because pretty much everything we do in utilities is split between the water department and the sewer department. So we received $145,000
Okay.
for the vehicle. So we're splitting that in half each.
Between the
department's
two.
gonna get-
Okay.
each fund's
Just
gonna
wanted to
get
make sure.
half of it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, Jim.
Well, I thought I was going to speak on the money going to the planner position, but,
We can speak to that as well.
well, I
It's a
believe
friendly group, Jim. It's okay.
the money Mark was talking about when we had talked about that was also to finance the zoning code enforcement person
Yeah.
for a half a year. So that includes that. The actually just bumping it for the planner was not that much. It was only about less than 10,000 of that.
So that's the question I had is, so this, what was the 51,000 or whatever this adds up to be, that includes half of the position, the new position for the planner, as well as
Right.
the addition. Okay.
Yes, that's correct. So that's what I was going to bring up was we're asking for the rest of that so we can have a zoning or a code enforcement person for the rest of the year once we can get that advertised and be about a half year's worth.
July-ish.
Yeah. The other monies, what was the other?
For the vehicle leases.
Oh, yeah.
For the-
Well, that was for the trucks
Yeah.
The two purchases.
that were appropriated. So
And then it was
that's
just,
what Ross is talking about. They're going to repurchase them back. So that money will come back at some point from you guys, I'm assuming.
okay. And then the last one on here was just salt replenishment.
Yeah, the salt, when we, out of the 205 fund, I believe that is,
Yes.
it did not have as much money in there as it normally has through the year. And we usually purchase our materials through that account. So there wasn't enough in there. It wasn't the amount I'd asked for at the beginning of the year, which is what we normally purchase salt for, which over the past few years, we've been reducing the tonnage that we're purchasing. And we still are in an agreement with the state that we're going to purchase 300 tons, which is about half of what we normally purchase. And, but there weren't enough funds in that account to pay for that. And we have to get it done by May 31st. So we're trying to make that arrangements to get that salt. So we're not in default on the agreement. We'd have to pay for it and not get the salt, basically. This next year, I'm taking a chance and not ordering any salt. We've got about 800 tons sitting around. We're going to put 300 out at the county, and we've got about 500 on site at our building. So we have more than what we normally use in the winter stored up.
Okay.
But
Perfect. Thank you. Anything else on the planner position that you want to add?
not unless you have some questions.
Question?
Funding, it's there.
Yes, after speaking.
The funding for the planner position
Yeah.
and the replacement for the zoning inspector, the funding is there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it is. And I'm glad that Jim did bring that up because, I guess it's not just for the planner. It is for making sure that we also have the continuation of a zoning
Code
person as
enforcement,
well.
yeah.
Questions from anyone else on council? Thank you. Mayor, do you have anything else? Okay, I'll take a recommendation. Yep.
Move we approve and send to council with our recommendation for approval.
All right, recommended by Tom Duval to send to council on May 21st with a recommendation for passage. I will second it. Melissa, can you please do a roll call?
Hedges,
Yes.
Duval.
Yes.
All right, that too will move on to council with a recommendation for passage. Thank you both very much for that. All right, the final thing on our agenda is a discussion with Mayor Blanton regarding the safety levy. This did not have a piece of legislation that was sent out, but she has provided a copy of a ordinance. I believe these are just copies of the previous two ordinances, which it would mirror that. And she also provided a little fact sheet. So I will turn it over to her and let her discuss.
Yeah, so there are 4 handouts that were given to each member of the committee. So council members, if you would like them, they're available. The first thing that I want to talk about is the document that says safety levy at the top. This is the document that was presented to council in 2019 when we first considered the safety levy. So these were the numbers provided to council by the administration. So it goes through and talks about the average cost, how many positions, why we considered the levy in the first place. Down at the bottom, it does include code enforcement as part of that reasoning. And in the safety director's position, it does have some of those safety code enforcement responsibilities. So that is part of the safety director's role. So there is the opportunity for this to be expanded. So I wanted to provide that to you as kind of a background of where we were. Of course, everyone is aware of the levy going to the citizens in November and not passing, and then going to them again in March. The second thing that I provided to you is a table. It has the years across the top, the funds down the left side. This shows the years from 2019 when we didn't have Fund 227 established to the last 4 full years and 1 quarter of 2024, where you can see funds used for safety, the safety department, which is basically the safety director. So security of persons in 101 safety department. Then you have civilian police, you have uniform police, and you have the fire department. Those are all the accounts that we looked at throughout the entire budget that had expenses spent over the last 5 years, so that you would have a full idea of the money spent towards safety forces in all of the funds. The only fund that is not represented here for, I believe it was 2022, is the ARPA funds that were used for the communications center. That one is not represented there. So you'll see there were also some changes in the way that expenses were taken out of certain lines. That was done by the auditor's office between 21 and 22. So you'll see that some expenses, and these are expenses on this chart. This is not revenues. This is what we've spent, where you can see that some things have moved. Some lines are greater than they were in the previous years, and that's because they were moved. The third document that you were provided was specific to 227, and that is the document that is 2 pages. It's stapled. This specifically shows the expenses from 227 since its inception. And then, of course, you'll see the first 3 months in the first quarter of 2024. And the reason that I bring this is so that you guys know where the expenses, where the money used in Fund 227 and other areas of the city have gone, based on the other pieces of our tax code that are represented by this ordinance. And that is Fund 212, 216, and 227. And of course, 101. So, any questions about those documents?
You have anything?
I do not.
Okay. So the question was asked where, since we've had the levy since we've had the resolution and ordinance passed by council be placed on the ballot to go to the voters for a vote 2 times, how do we move forward, or what are we going to do to move forward? In looking at this, and there's been conversations about do we break it up into 2 parts, into a police levy and a fire levy, which is an option that other municipalities have done. Do we simply not do we not place the levy on the ballot again in 2024? Do we wait? Or do we do something else? And so by looking at these numbers, and as a council member seeing this before, the possibility of taking the $2 million, the $2.47 thousand that was spent in 2023 from 227, and taking that and putting it up into the other line items throughout the budget just wouldn't be possible. The city would have to significantly cut other programs in those other line items in order to make that up. The funds that you see in 227, from what I can see, are mainly our operation dollars for those departments. Our salaries are paid out of 212 for uniform and civilian police and fire. The personnel costs that you see come out of 227 are for overtime and personnel payouts. And so you can see those in each of the funds, and then in lines 51001, that's where those come out of every section. And so my recommendation is or my ask would be to consider putting this 0.4 back on the ballot again. If it fails, we're going to be making decisions anyway. We're going to be making decisions because we're not going to have the funding to pay for the expenses that have come out.
So in November, this was put on the ballot and it lost considerably.
Mm-hmm.
In March, it was put on the ballot and lost by 51 votes.
Mm-hmm.
So the margin definitely decreased.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to get this to pass if it gets put back on the ballot?
Yeah, so great question. I think from an administration perspective, we can provide factual information to our citizens about Fund 227. We can say, this is where the dollars have been spent, and this is our responsibility and our commitment to you onto how these funds are going to be submitted in the future. It is not specifically to say vote yes or vote no. It is solely to provide factual information about the budget for the city of Circleville. Any effort outside of that to sway voters one way or another would have to come from outside entities. So from my perspective as the mayor, we will push out as much information as we can all throughout the year to provide a report to council, to our citizens, of how this money has and will be spent. We haven't had a safety committee meeting yet, but we have already put together quarterly reports for both police and fire that shows each line and where those expenses have specifically gone all throughout the safety funds. So that is, to answer your question, Katie, that is the administration's commitment.
Comments?
What do you think?
I guess, and I know that I've said this previously, I just don't understand. I think that you can push out factual information about what is, and I think that's all right, and is probably the approach to get factual information out there. I think that there is a considerable mountain to climb to get the voters to commit to giving money. Even if you can push out facts, they can also push right back about some other facts. I just think that if we put it out again and it fails again, it will be extremely detrimental to its hope of it passing in the future. So I fully understand that getting it passed is not a effort that just falls on the administration's shoulders. But I don't think without a comprehensive plan of how we could get this thing passed, I don't know that the rest of these details matter. And maybe I'm totally wrong about that. I just am very nervous about what is the plan to get in front of what we're already dealing with in terms of, what are we going to say to the feedback that we've already heard at this podium with concerns that people have already said?
Yeah.
How are we going to combat that to get this levy to pass?
I think each and every one of us can play a part in that, and also providing that factual information, but also on our own time and on our own dime, we can tell people individually whether we support it or not.
And again, I don't disagree with that, but I spent a lot of time and a lot of my own dimes to get the previous one passed, and we fell 51 votes short, and that was many, many tails ago. So I just worry about what that really will look like. It looks like your ordinance that you're suggesting is an exact mirror of the
It is exactly
of the same proposal as before. So it is at a 0.4, which is a decrease of what people are currently paying. That is at 0.5.
Yeah.
So
I would also say that it does still include the language in section 6 that this replacement tax allocation to be used for the operation and maintenance is to be expended for safety forces prior to the use of the funds allocated in the general fund. So there's the accountability there too that wasn't in the 2019 language, and it wasn't in the November language.
questions, comments, Mr. Duval? Deep sighs.
Well, yeah, excuse me. I'm not ready to make a decision right now.
So just to clarify, this, because we didn't get the legislation, this is a discussion. That's all this is.
It's a
at this
discussion.
Okay,
point. When we had talked previously, the mayor wanted to start a discussion, which I am in agreement with, based on the time frame to have to get this on the ballot. If we were to get it on the ballot, it has to be to the Board of Elections by August.
Like 7th.
Yeah. And last year, when we started this discussion about the levy, it was an 8-month-long process. So we wanted to make sure that this was the preliminary discussion. I think, unless you have other questions,
I do not.
what I'd like to entertain as a follow-up, obviously, meeting, I think we're going to have some input from other council members, from Mr. Hallen and the safety director, or the safety chair, because I'm guessing that there's going to be other questions that are going to have to be answered.
Yeah.
A lot of council is in the auditorium. Questions, comments, thoughts?
There was a lot of confusion on this levy last 2 times because we were asking for a decrease down to 0.4 vice the current 0.5. We need to get past that. We need to convince the voters that indeed we need this money, or we start unfortunately eliminating positions. And how do we get through that? Because, like I say, after the election, when you asked folks, they said, we were confused. We were confused about how the ballot was developed, and why are you asking for a decrease? It's almost like we need something else to convince them. Either, keep the 0.5, which is certainly something that I, would prefer, so as to take away the confusion and bring, and put the 0.5 there instead of the 0.4 itself. So, like I say, we need better wording. We also need better information out to the community to say, hey, okay, this is really it. I know, we went out and knocked on doors, many doors, and folks were responsive, but they were also coming back and saying, why are you asking for 0.4 instead of leaving it as is, status quo, and so on? We can understand that. So we definitely need a better plan. We need all of us on board. I know, some of us from council were there, some of us, from administration was there, and so on, but not enough of us were out. Not enough those in uniform were out there. I know certainly the police chief, the fire chief, and so on were out there. But, the way we got the school levy passed was putting more men and more women on the job. It's phone calls, not just knocking on doors, but really just getting the information out there. It took 2 times to get the levy for the schools passed and so on, but we got it passed.
Yep.
And that's the thing too. So it really, it goes back to a point is that the way I feel that I was raised was by the village. If the Catholic nuns in the neighborhood, the neighbors next door, my aunts, uncles, grandparents, my own parents, sisters, brothers, and so on, we all came together. And, we had a better situation. And I think we really need to get all of us on board, not just a few.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah, and so I want to just address a couple things you said. I echo everything you said in terms of the people that helped you. I know went door to door many times, so I appreciate that. And I think there is no question, if there is an effort to get this to go through, that there must be full consensus of effort, both on the administrative, the fire department, the police department, this whole group of people, the PAC, everybody else. In terms of the language, so that was an issue that was brought up to the Secretary of State, because we do not decide the language. The language is sent to them. We asked, I spoke to them. I don't know if you spoke to them. Someone else had contacted them as well, but I had spoke to them and can speak to that. We literally asked them, can we use the word decrease? Can we use less? Like those very specific words. And the answer was no. And it was repeatedly no. It's not part of the ORC. It doesn't allow for it. I do think there was, it's rare to have a decrease. So I think it's not something that they've commonly gone up against. If we were to do this again, whether it was 0.5 or if we were to do the 0.4, we would have similar challenges based on the fact that we cannot dictate what it says. And some of those efforts were made. This is just a personal opinion comment, but I am hesitant to change it to 0.5 to go back to what people are paying. This body of people agreed that we had a responsibility to decrease it if we could. And we said twice that we thought we could do that. So to the third time, move it back to what they're currently paying and not making it a decrease just because it's hard to understand. To me, we should take on the responsibility of education before we ask taxpayers to pay more than what they might need to. Also understanding that it is a considerable mountain to climb to do that. But I think your points are all valid. Thank you for them.
Sure.
Mr. Modes, Mrs. Tice, comments?
Yeah, I do. I just, with what we're dealing with and getting through that, I think we need to be, it concerns me that we're fighting an uphill battle putting this back on the ballot. So if we can be sure that we're gonna take care of this and express to our citizens, I think with this type of thing, they need to know how this helps them and why they're voting for it, not just, hey, we might, it's less money or more money or you're being taxed on it, but I think just educating them on what's in it for them and how the safety forces provide for them and bringing to light maybe what they do on a daily basis for them and being upfront with how much they do for our city could possibly be helpful, also in overcoming what we're trying to overcome and move forward.
Thank you. Mrs. Tice?
I do agree with you that the ballot language was confusing, and it would be so helpful if we could put that it's a decrease and, it is a renewal of the lead class one, replacement of the last one. But the Ohio Revised Code does not allow for that. I did reach out to our state representative to see if he could look into that. I mean, there's a possibility that the Ohio Revised Code could change that. He could do that through the State House. I don't know if it will be in time for November, but it's just, I did reach out.
Thank you. That's good to know. Did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so the Ohio Ballot Question and Issues Handbook specifically does include the information for that, where it says that the ballot language, the final decision rests with the Board of Elections. And so it does say that in there. And then to the point about the information, there are cities that have provided information out saying what services are provided. And I think that's an initiative that we can, from the city, take as factual information and provide that information for our citizens.
Thank you. So in respect to people's times in the meeting right after us, I do want to wrap up. This will be, again, this is the scratching the surface of this discussion that will be ongoing in the very, very near future, because again, that decision will need to be made the next less than 3 months, if we decide to move forward on that. But any other discussion items, any old business?
Move to adjourn.
Nothing. Motion to adjourn by Tom Duval, and it is 6:02 and we are adjourned.